Hello and welcome to this class of Principles of Microeconomics. I am your teacher Muhammad Nadeem Salwan. Today we shall continue our discussion on oligopoly and duopoly market structure, and in this lecture we shall start with some basic concepts of game theory. Game theory is one of the most applied side of microeconomics, which is used in not only economics but also in political science, defense, business studies, and so many other subjects. So let's start with the lecture. Students, by game, we mean a situation in which players or participants of the game take strategic decisions. What are the strategic decisions? Let's put it on a hold for a moment. Likewise, game theory is the study of games. That is, it is the study of strategic interdependence or strategic interaction among the players of the game. Now, what is strategic decision or what is strategic interaction or situation of interdependence? Students, what we have studied in consumer or in producer side models is the situation in which a single consumer or a single producer is making a choice and all the benefit or the cost of making the decision are just because of his or her own decisions. However, many times in the life we come across a situation in which what we get at the end does not only depend on our own decision, but it also depends on the decisions of others. Such situation is called as the situation of interdependence, and the decisions in such situations are called as strategic decisions. So, in other words, strategic interaction or interdependence represents a situation which involve externalities. That is, the decision of one person not only influence his or her own utility, profit, loss, etc., but also influence the utility, interest, or profit or loss of others. For example, if there are five firms in a market, then the price decisions taken by one firm will not only affect its revenue and profit, but they will also affect the revenue and profit of rest of the firms. The effect depends on how close the products of all these firms are to each other and what is the market share of each firm and so many other things as well. Similarly, the study of the subject in class is also a strategic decision example or an example of strategic interaction, if we can better say this like that. Your outcome in form of knowledge you gain or the grades you get not only if depends upon your own efforts which you as a student, but it also depends on how you were taught by your teacher. Similarly, what a teacher teaches is also dependent on what kind of the response he or she is getting from the class. A challenging class makes teacher to put in more efforts and to come with more concrete things, new ideas, and it also makes teacher to learn something new. There are so many other examples of strategic interaction, but let's move on. The game theory or game requires at least two separate decision makers. A single decision maker making a decision will only be affected by his or her own choice. But if there are two decision makers who are taking a decision jointly or who are sitting opposite to each other and confronting with each other, then their overall utility and the utility of each or the benefit of each is also dependent on others' action and reactions. In most of the game theory questions that we shall deal in this lecture and in the lecture ahead will be based on the games of two players. There are some ingredients that make a game. These ingredients include number one, players. The players are the participants or the decision maker. These could be a number of consumers, a certain number of producers, both consumers and producers, consumers and government, producers and government, government and government, and so on and so forth. So everyone who is a decision maker is a player. Then actions. Actions describe what possible moves are available to each player. That is, what possible set of actions or what possible strategies each player can play at each stage of the game. Next are information. That is, when a player is making a move, what he knows. For example, if a firm is making a decision whether to introduce a new product in the market or not, then the information may include what is the willingness to pay among the people for this product, how much is the anticipation of this product, how many firms are producing similar kind of product, what are their experience about the market, and so on. Similarly, if you take an example of cricket, then while being on the batting side, a batsman knows who is the bowler, what kind of bowling he or she does, what is the field setting, what is my score, what is my team's score, what is the situation of match. All this represents information. Next are the outcomes. When players adopt a certain move, those moves may result in good or bad for them. So whatever the results of the actions, we call them as outcomes. Next are the payoffs. Payoffs are the reward generated by the outcomes. Sometimes outcomes and payoffs are same, but sometimes they are different. For example, for a consumer, the outcome could be the income earned and payoff could be the utility obtained from the income. Next is the preferences. Preferences means the rank of players' choice. How players rank different choices. Now let's understand some of these with the help of an example. Let's assume that there are two players, Mr. ABC and Mr. MNO and Mr. XYZ. Mr. MNO has some amount of money with him. He can either invest that money in restaurant or he can put that money into the saving account. Therefore, these are the two possible choices that person MNO has to make up till now. Now, let's assume if the person adopts for constructing a restaurant, then he has a further choice. He can make the restaurant at the central point of the city, or he can open a restaurant at a picnic point. Up till now, there is one player in the game. I'm sorry, game should include at least two players, but we will introduce the second player later. So till now we have only one player. The player has possible moves such as opening a restaurant at Central Point, opening a restaurant at Picnic Point, or opening a saving account and put his money into that account. The player could have so many other choices to make in the real life. For example, more than the 2 points to open a restaurant or the kind of the restaurant, for example, an Italian food serving restaurant, an Indian food serving restaurant, or Chinese food serving restaurant, and so on and so forth. But we are making it simple just for our own understanding. Now let's introduce the second player, Mr. XYZ. Unlike Mr. MNO, Mr. XYZ has made a decision clearly that he will be opening a restaurant. So for him, it is to choose whether he will open the restaurant at Center Point or at Picnic Point. So we can say that this game includes two players, Mr. MNO and Mr. XYZ. The choice set or the actions that are available to Mr. MNO at stage we marked as A are opening a restaurant or opening a saving account and putting money in that. Then, if he opens the restaurant, the game moves to point C. Now again, he has to make a certain choice between opening it at center point or opening it at picnic point. So the total moves available to player MNO, which we call as actions, could be opening a restaurant at central point, opening a restaurant at picnic point, or opening a saving account. Then Mr. XYZ, at each stage of the game, he has two moves, either to open a restaurant at Central Point or to open a restaurant at Picnic Point. The points marked as A, B, C, D, E, K, H, G, F, J, L are called as nodes. Each node belongs to one and only one player in the game. When game reaches at node K, we have a payoff numbered as 00. This payoff represents if Mr. MNO opened a restaurant at Central Point and Mr. XYZ also opened a restaurant at Central Point, the payoff of Mr. MNO will be 0 and payoff of Mr. XYZ will also be 0. Similarly, the node F represents if Mr. MNO decided to open a restaurant at Picnic Point and Mr. XYZ also decided to open a restaurant at Picnic Point, then the payoff of Mr. MNO will be 1 and payoff of Mr. XYZ will also be 1. Similarly, the node L can be read out as if Mr. MNO decided to put his amount in saving account and Mr. XYZ decided to open a restaurant at Picnic Point, then the payoff of Mr. MNO or the payoff received by Mr. MNO will be 1 unit and the payoff received by Mr. XYZ will be 6. These could be termed as outcomes or payoff depending upon the situation in the game. Here at point at node A, B, C, D, and E, each of the two player, either of the two player has to make a decision. Therefore, these are called as decision nodes. And if the game reaches to node K, H, G, F, J, or L, the game ends. So these are called as terminal nodes. Keep in mind that each node belongs to one and only one player, and each node could be reached in one specific way. Representing game in this form is called as extensive form representation or game tree for representation. There is another way of representing the game as well, which is known as intensive form representation or matrix form representation. Games are of so many types. For example, complete information game, incomplete information game, sequential games, simultaneous games, cooperative games, non-cooperative games, and so many other forms. But here we are interested in just two types. One, non-cooperative games. These are the games in which the players make no contract to cooperate with each other. Therefore, each player competes with all other players in the game. This is like non-inclusive oligopoly. However, in cooperative games, players cooperate with each other and make move in consideration with each other. These are like inclusive models in oligopoly. Now, strategy. What is strategy? Student, strategy is the complete contingent plan for a player in the game. Whatsoever move a player can make in the game, list of all such moves is called as strategy. A key objective of the game theory is to determine the optimal strategy for each player, which maximizes the return, the payoff, or the outcome of the player. Like games, there are so many different types of strategies. For example, dominant strategy, dominated strategy, Nash equilibrium strategy, mixed strategy, pure strategy, etc. But the optimal strategy of a player is the one that maximizes the player's expected payoff. We use the term expected payoff because we do not know our payoff certainly. It is because our payoff is not dependent just on our own actions. And normally, we cannot predict with certainty what move the other player will play. So, we always care for expected payoff. The concept of optimal strategy is somewhat similar to the concept of equilibrium that we used in earlier lectures. As I told you, there are so many different kinds of strategies. However, here we start with two of them. First called dominant strategy and other called as dominated strategy. A dominant strategy, as the name suggests, is a strategy that is optimal or that is best or that generates best outcome no matter what other player chooses. Let's first understand it with the help of an example, and then through that example we shall also try to understand what is a dominated strategy. Let's assume we have two players. This form of game is called as intensive form or matrix form. We write down the players, the strategies, and possible outcomes or payoffs. In each box or at each place, the first outcome or first payoff belongs to row player and second outcome or second payoff belongs to column player. So in this game, player 1 has two strategies. He can either play up or he can play down. Similarly, player 2 also has two strategies. He or she can either play up or can play down. If player 1 plays up and player 2 also plays up, player 1's outcome will be 10 and player 2's outcome will also be 10. If player 1 plays up and player 2 plays down, then player 1's output or outcome will be 7 and players 2 will be 7 as well. With this understanding, now let's proceed to see if player 1 has any dominant strategy. That is, if player 1 has any strategy which is best no matter what choice player 2 makes. To check it for player 1, we first fix player 2's strategy. Let's assume that player 2 plays up this. So if player 1 also plays up, his outcome or output is 10, and if he plays down, his output, payoff or outcome will be 7. As we assume both players are rational, so player 1 should go for up because it maximizes its payoff or outcome. Now let's see if this strategy is also optimal if player 2 plays the other option. That is, now we check it if player 2 plays down. So if player 2 plays down, again the player 1 has two choices to make. He can either play up or down. However, looking at the payoffs, the player 1 should play up because the payoffs are higher than the payoffs in case of down. This tells us that up for player 1 is a strategy. Means for player 1, out of these two strategies, up and down, up is one which always guarantees him maximum payoff or maximum output or maximum outcome, no matter whatever choice player 2 makes. So we can say that for player 1, up is a dominant strategy. Now let's check in the same way for player 2. We shall proceed in similar way. That is, now we shall fix strategy for player 1 and then investigate what strategy should be adopted by player 2. If his choice remains the same and all the choices made by player 1, then that is player 2's dominant strategy. So let's assume that player 1 plays up. In this case, if player 2 plays up, his or her payoff is 10, and if plays down, the payoff is 7. So Up should be the choice of second player. That is, if player 1 plays up, player 2's optimal strategy is also playing up. Now check it for alternative strategy of player 1. That is, now let's see in case of down. If player 1 plays down, player 2 should play up. Why? Because in this case, playing down will generate an outcome or payoff of 5 and playing up will generate it equal to 7. Therefore, higher outcome is always preferred. So, in other words, we can say that up is a strategy for player 2, which is optimal strategy for this player no matter what player 1 does. So, in this case, up is dominant strategy for player 2. Now, let's see which strategy is not best or is worse for player 1. Definitely, it is down strategy. So, this is dominated strategy. Similarly, for player 2, such a strategy is also down. So, down is dominated strategy for player 2. I hope you have understood the method or the technique to find dominant strategy for each player. It is possible that in a game both players have dominant strategy. It is also possible that none of the players in the game has dominant strategy. And it is also possible that one player has a dominant strategy and other does not have it. Now, for your practice, do the second example yourself and I will wait for you and will tell you the exact result. That is, will tell you the dominant strategy for each player. So, first try yourself. Okay, now let me tell you. First, this time we do it for player 2, fixing player 1's strategy as right. If player 2 plays up, output or outcome is 10. Playing down, output or outcome is 15. So player should play down. Changing player 1's strategy. In this case, if player 1 plays left, player 2's outcome could be 5 or 10. He should opt for 10, that is for playing up. Now, in this case, we can see that player 2 has no single strategy which always generate optimal outcome for player 2 no matter what player 1 does. So in this case, player 2 has no dominant strategy. Now let's check it for player 1. Assume player 2 plays up. Player 1 should play left because it gives him higher output or higher outcome compared to playing right. But if player 2 plays down, again comparing the output or payout of both choices, player 1 should play down. Sorry, player 1 should play left. Therefore, now left is a strategy for player 1 which generates optimal output for him no matter what player 2 plays. So, in this game, player 1 has a dominant strategy which is to play left, but player 2 does not have a dominant strategy. Now, let's do another example. Now, in this example, each of the two players has three strategies each. Now, let's check the optimal strategy for player 1. If player 2 plays A, player 1 should play X because playing X generates outcome of 10 which is higher compared to outcome 0 and 2. If player 2 plays B, again the player 1 should play X because the outcome is highest. Now let's see for strategy C of player 2. If strategy X is still optimal, then we can say that X is dominant strategy for player 1. In case player 2 plays C, player 1's optimal choice should be playing Y because that gives him highest output, outcome or payoff. So we cannot say that there is one single strategy available with player 1 which can beat all the strategies and can generate him maximum output or can guarantee him maximum payoff no matter what player 2 does. Therefore, in this game, player 1 has no dominant strategy. Now, let's look for player 2 in the same way. If player 1 plays X, player 2 should play A because it gives him highest reward. If player 1 plays Y, player 2 should play B because this gives him highest payoff. We do not even need to check the strategy that gives highest reward in case player 1 plays Z because even till here we can see that there is no single strategy available to player 2 which generates optimal output against each and every possible strategy of player 1. So In this game, the player 2 also does not have a dominant strategy. Students, I have interchangeably used words outcome, output, and payout. Outcome or output could be same, but it is not guaranteed that outcomes and payouts are also the same in each and every case. It depends how the game is described before you. Since here there is no description, so I assume that they are the same. But do not take it as a rule, please. Now we can see that in some games we can find a dominant strategy for each player. In some games we can find dominant strategy for one of the players. And in some games we are unable to find a dominant strategy for any player in the game. If each and every player in the game has a dominant strategy, then we call the outcome of the game as equilibrium in dominant strategies. However, as we saw that this is not possible in each and every game. So what is the solution? What is the equilibrium solution of the game? In such case, we have to study another concept presented by John Nash, and it is called as Nash equilibrium. Nash equilibrium is a very important concept in game theory. Each and every game in the game theory has a Nash equilibrium. Some games have more than one Nash equilibrium. A Nash equilibrium, for our understanding, is a set of strategies or actions or moves such that each player is doing best given the move of its opponent. This is where lies the difference between Nash equilibrium and dominant strategy equilibrium. Dominant strategy is the strategy which is best no matter what other does. But Nash equilibrium represents the set of strategy which is best for a player given the actions of his opponent. And since we assume that all the players are rational, so we can say that the opponent will present his or her best. That's why sometimes Nash equilibrium strategy is called the best strategy in response to other players' best strategy. However, for the definition, we shall just restrict it to the best of one player given the action of its opponent. These sentences clear the difference between dominant strategy and Nash equilibrium. A dominant strategy for me is my best against whatever you do, and for you is your best against whatever I do. However, Nash strategies are my best given what you are doing, and for you it is your best given what I am doing. I hope the difference between the two is clear. However, if it is still not clear, please ask your question in comment section below this video. Another confusion that may arise is You may think that in Nash equilibrium, the player knows opponent's strategies. That is, the player knows before moving what the opponent has played. This is not necessarily to be true. Both players can move at the same time without knowing other players move. Even then, we can have Nash equilibrium in the game. The tip to check if a certain point is a Nash equilibrium or not is to see whether one of the player, knowing that the other player has made this move, would like to change his move. That is, let's assume two players played a move blindly. Then the outcome was revealed before the both players. Now both players know what opponent played. Now just ask a question to both players. Would now you like to change your move? If any of player answers it yes, then this point does not represent Nash equilibrium. If both players say no, I'm okay with my choice given I have seen the choice of other player, then this represents Nash equilibrium. Now let's do an example of this. Again, we have two players. Player 1 can either play X or Y. Player 2 can either play A or B. Now let's see if there is a Nash equilibrium in this game or not. The easiest way to check the Nash equilibrium is to underline the best response of each player against each possible response of the other player. Let's first do it and then move to second stage. Let's do it for player 1. If player 2 plays A, what should player 1 play? He should play X. Underline it. If player 2 plays B, what should player 1 play? He should play X. Underline. Now, same for player 2. If player 1 plays X, what should player 2 play? A or B? A. Underline it. If player 2 plays, if player 1 plays Y, what should player 2 play? The payoff of player 2 is same in both cases. If he plays A or B, the payoff is 3. So underline both. This is first stage. Second stage is very simple now. Just look at this game and see if there is any point in which all the options are underlined. Yes, that point is this. So X for player 1 and A for player 2. XA, this point represents the Nash equilibrium of the game. How? Let's see. Let's assume both players made this choice, game reached to this point and stopped. They made the choice unknowingly. Now the choice is revealed. Player 1 is given an option. He is told, look, player 2 has opted for A. Now Would you like to change your choice? And player 1 knows that since player 2 is playing A, his optimal decision is X. So his answer may be, no, I'm okay with what I choose. That's the best decision. Now go to player 2 and ask, sir, player 1 has played X. Now would you like to change your decision? Instead of playing A, would you like to play B? The player 2 will look at the options and he will just say that no, with A I'm getting 1 and with B I will get 0. So I would like to remain with A. This confirms that XA is the Nash equilibrium of the game. Now let's do it on another example. This is called as Battle of Sexes, in which two players are from opposite sexes and they have to decide between doing a task or playing a game that involves two players. Let's assume that a husband and wife are making a decision either to play badminton or to play boxing. Let's first take the decision for wife. If husband chooses to play boxing, the wife should play badminton or boxing. She should opt for boxing. This is best for her. If husband opted to choose playing badminton, what should wife choose? Badminton or boxing? Definitely badminton because it is the best choice for her. Okay. Now for the other player, that is for the husband. If wife chooses to play badminton, should husband play badminton or boxing? Badminton. Underline it. But what if wife chooses to play boxing? Should husband choose badminton or boxing? In this case, husband's optimal choice should be boxing. Now, we just have to look if there is a strategy in which all the options are underlined. Oh yeah, we have two such strategies. So this game has two Nash equilibrium. Let's check both of them. We walk over to wife and say, look, the husband has decided to play badminton. What would you like to choose? In this case, her optimal response will be playing badminton. Same, we shall put this question to husband. The wife has opted to playing badminton. What will be your choice in this case? You opted for choosing badminton. Would you like to change your decision? And he will be like, no, no, I'm very happy playing badminton. So this confirms that badminton is a Nash equilibrium. Now let's check it for boxing and boxing. To why? Husband is playing boxing. You also opted to play boxing. Would you like to change your decisions now? And her response, no. Same question to husband. And his response will also be no. So when the choices are revealed and both players were given a chance to change their choice, they both answered no. Hence both point represents Nash equilibrium. That is badminton and boxing. Both are Nash equilibrium of the game. I hope the concept of Nash equilibrium is clear now. But if there is any confusion, please write it down in comments box. Next, we are going to study the situation of prisoner's dilemma. This represents a special case in game theory. In this game, we have two players. Both are both committed a crime, but the police does not have a strong evidence. So they arrested both, put them in separate lockups, and made them an offer to confess the case. And if they confessed, they will have no punishment. All the punishment will be faced by the other party. This offer is presented to both of them. They both cannot contact with each other. Hence, they will have to make their choice independently without knowing what other person is choosing. This represents a situation in which the final outcome of both the players is dependent on their decisions. Definitely, or the final outcome of each of the player is also dependent on his decision, her decision, and opponent's decision. If they could have a system of exchanging information before arriving at the decision, they would have made better choice. But since they do not have information and they do not have a contact with each other, hence their decision, which they make in the best of their interest, may actually result in worse. When such a paradox happens, that is, the decision that I am taking, considering my best, ultimately turns out to be a worse decision for me. This is called as prisoner's dilemma, and this is because the other party that was also influencing the outcome of my decision was not in contact with me. So let's understand it with the help of example. Again, two persons committed a crime. Police does not have a strong evidence against them. They put them into separate lockups and give each of them a choice. Look, if you confessed and your partner does not, you will be free and all the punishment of total 10 years, your partner will face it. That is, your partner will be in jail for 10 years. Since both players cannot contact with each other, now let's understand what player 1 will do, what will be his optimal choice. He would just think, look, if player 1 confesses, I and I could be in jail for 8 years if I confess too. But if I lied, I could be in jail for 10 years. In this case, it's best for me to confess. What if other person lied? Look, if he lied and I confessed, I'll be free. But if he lied and I also lied, we shall be facing this investigation and remain in lockup for 1 year. So, in this case, it's better for me. It is in my best interest to confess. So, this will be the optimal choice. That is, confess will be the dominant strategy for player 1. Now, same for player 2. Let's fix the responses of player 1 and check it the strategies of player 2. Player 2 knows if he confesses, if the other one confessed, that is player 1 confessed, he could be in jail for 8 years if he confesses true, or if he lied, he would have to be in jail for 10 years. In this case, confess is optimal choice for him. What if player 1 lied? Player 2 can think, look, if I player 1 lied and if I confess, I would be free. But if I lie as well, then we both have to face these investigations over a period of 1 year, and during this, we'll be in lockup. So, the best choice for me is to confess. This is dominant strategy for player 2. So, end up solution will be confess, confess. And in this case, they both will be in jail for 8 years each. However, if they both have exchanged information and they both have trusted each other for their decisions, they could have reduced this loss to 1 year each. Now, what guarantees that this game is prisoner's dilemma? In prisoner's dilemma, the choice made by both the players will be worse than the choice that both players could have made in case they had contacted with each other and had trusted with each other. That is, the collusion outcome will be higher than the choice outcome. How? Let's calculate outcome in case of collusion or in case of cartel when both players have a contact. Here it is 8 plus 8, 16. Here it is 0 plus 10, that is 10 years of jail. Here it is 0 plus 10, that is 10 years of jail. And here it is minus 1, that is 2 years of jail. So collective decision, or the decision that would have been optimal for both of them, would have been this, that is lie, lie. Since the decision which is best or which is taken keeping in view own self-interest produces less outcome or worse outcome than the decision taken jointly considering the optimal of considering the best for all or considering the social best. So this game, which will end up at confess confess, is prisoner's dilemma. That's all for this lecture. In the next lecture, we shall discuss some more basic terms of game theory. Please post your questions and give your feedback in comments. Also, like the video and share it with your friends. Thank you and goodbye.